Yeah. First of all, welcome everybody. Welcome to our second webinar for the series of sharing economy in specific. We have been doing this in partnership with FES, which is the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung non-profit organization. It's a German foundation and it's committed to democracy and social justice. A little bit about us. As I said, I am Shruti. I am leading the policy and advocacy team at Chintan. Chintan Environmental Research and Action Group has been working on urban issues, sustainability, and environmental justice for the past almost 20 years now. And we sort of, our aim is to ensure that consumption is such that it does not have adverse impact on the environment and the marginalized. And that's where our work is dedicated towards. And we believe that when we discuss the circular economy and how the sharing economy can be made a part of it, we want to raise awareness about it and try to understand for ourselves and for our audience how we can really scale it up. So the last session that we did was more of an introductory session, and this time we want to dive right into it and discuss real-time ways in which we can scale it up. So we have a great panel. We have, to start with, our panel is being moderated by Bharti Chaturvedi, who is our very own founder and director. And we have with us Mr. Piyush Dhawan, who is the German Chancellor Fellow, Humboldt Fellow, and a TEDx speaker. He has worked with the United Nations and with GIZ for about 10 years now. He's also the co-founder of the Circular Collective, and he has represented India at many, many international conferences, from the Global Environment Academy to European Forum, ALPAC, DAAD in Mongolia, and several others, including the G20 summit in Korea. We have with us Ketan Krishna next. Mr. Krishna is the people head at Rentomojo. He's a market leader in the rental ecosystem. He loves technology and is, as he says, bullish on the future of HR tech. He believes that the HR function of the future would be a lot like that of product management, and which means that you understand technology, understand business, and design products that work. And he is pretty much an HR icon, and he's written extensively. He's a published author, and he completed his post-graduation in MDI Gurgaon and has since been working with the Aditya Birla Group, and now he's with Rentomojo, and he's, as I said, he's also a published author. We have with us also Aishwarya Raman, who's the director and head of research at Ola Mobility Institute, which is a new age policy research and social innovation think tank, developing knowledge frameworks at the intersection of mobility, innovation, and public good. After completing her MSc in sociology from the University of Oxford, she's had over a decade of professional experience in mobility. And she's also the co-founder and ex-CEO of Auto Raja, which was one of India's earliest and largest book and auto services. So we have her with her, and so welcome all of you. And with that, over to you, Bharti.
Thank you, Shruti, and welcome to all of you. Unfortunately, Shamika Ravi, who had said that she specifically wanted to present a couple of ideas here on the sharing economy. As you all know, she's done quite a lot of work on this. She was called away to a meeting, and so we're going to start without her. And well, the way it's going to work is I'm going to ask all of you to, present, between 7 to about 10 minutes each. And when we finish with the three of you, we will ask if any of you have questions for your co-panelists before throwing it open to people in the audience and so on, because then we get to hearing a debate from within you. So without any further ado, I'd request Aishwarya Raman to please begin.
Thanks, Bharati. Thanks, Team Chintan and FES for having me here. I'll share my screen and begin the presentation. Thanks, Shruti, for a wonderful introduction. I am Aishwarya, for those of you who are unfamiliar with my work. I have over a decade of experience in the mobility economy. If you can just give me 1 second, please, sorry. The presentation stuck. Today, I head research, like Shruti mentioned, at the Ola Mobility Institute. OMI is a policy research and social innovation think tank. We carry out research across the broad areas of sustainable urban mobility, electric mobility and energy, future of work and platform economy, accessibility and inclusion, and more. The institute has been set up by Ola, one of the world's largest mobility platforms. At OMI today, we're currently interested in understanding how we can support economies, particularly the emerging economy of India, to overcome the pandemic-induced challenges and build for the day after tomorrow. We all know how the dual health come economic crisis of COVID-19 has in fact started reversing a lot of the sustainable and equitable measures being taken by countries around the world. So at OMI, we're interested in seeing how we can support India in placing safety, sustainability, and resilience back on the national agenda by leveraging the 4 new paradigms of mobility called shared, connected, electric, and autonomous. Another focus area for us is to explore how these new paradigms of mobility can be leveraged to unlock millions of livelihood opportunities for the masses. And these focus areas, folks, are going to be my guiding points for today's presentation titled The Promise of Shared, Connected, Electric, and Autonomous Mobility for India. The world over, ubiquity of smartphones and availability of affordable data have ushered in a new era of mobility. Today, mobility is ride-hailing, ride-sharing, carpooling, car sharing, bike sharing, smart parking, electric mobility, autonomous mobility, telematics, mapping, connected vehicles, connected infrastructure, fleet management, insurance, and so much more. How do we see all these changes happening? One, of course, is the evolving consumer needs and changing business models and innovations. And 2, the necessity for us to innovate and use our existing limited resources in an efficient fashion. So today, naturally, we see sharing of real estate, sharing in the media streaming space, goods and service providers, and of course, sharing in the mobility economy as well. What is happening today is that we have the ownership of the ride, meaning the access to a car or a two-wheeler replacing the ownership of the drive, meaning the ownership of the two-wheeler itself. And this is the rise of the collaborative sharing economy that we see all around us. India specifically is the new frontier of this next economic revolution driven purely by mobility. India is well poised to ride the wave of shared mobility. We have extremely low per capita ownership of personal vehicles. We as a nation already heavily rely on shared mobility. Census 2011, for instance, tells us that 55% of our everyday commute happens on public transport, intermediate public transport such as taxi cabs, and via non-motorized transport modes such as walking and cycling. Increasingly, over the last decade in India, we've seen how digitalization of shared mobility is taking place. Today, digital rides are anywhere northwards of 3.5 million a day. In the IPT sector, the digital IPT space is generating livelihood opportunities for over 6 million people compared to the IT sector that generates around 4 million plus direct employment. This form of shared mobility, digitalized shared mobility, is able to serve underserved areas or unserved areas of public transportation in many cities and many urban agglomerations. IPT offers first and last mile connectivity to public transit. IPT becomes the major transportation mode in Tier 2 and Tier 3 markets. It is the tool to disincentivize the ownership of personal vehicles and incentivize the adoption of shared mobility, thereby reduce congestion in cities and make cities more livable. But is this what India wants? To explore this, at the Ola Mobility Institute, we developed a unique, first of its kind mobility framework called the Ease of Moving Index. This index allows us to gauge the mobility scenarios in cities and compare one city with another. In order to collect data for this index, we conducted India's largest mobility survey involving 43,500 respondents across 20 Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 markets. We then analyzed the data and made a bunch of policy recommendations. Further, we disaggregated the data on the basis of gender and also answered the key question of what women and girls want from urban mobility systems in the country. When we take a deep dive into the first mobility paradigm of shared, we see that in India, there are plenty of micromobility and shared mobility options ranging from public bicycle sharing and bike taxis and auto rickshaws and taxi cabs on the one hand, to even minibuses and electric mobility equivalents of each of these modes. The impact of this form of ride sharing is immense. Consider the platform of Ola Share alone. Between mid-2015 and early 2019, Ola Share was able to save over 37 million liters of import-dependent fossil fuel and reduce carbon dioxide emissions by over 63 million kilograms. When we look at the second paradigm of mobility, which is electric, we need to go back to 2017 and take a deep dive into India's first multimodal electric mobility project involving electric rickshaws and electric taxi cabs in the city of Nagpur. Ola Mobility Institute studied this project closely, and we presented lessons from India's first multimodal electric mobility project in our report, Beyond Nagpur, the Promise of Electric Mobility. What was interesting for us was to see that Ola Electric alone between 2017 and 2019 was able to serve over 350,000 customers, clock over 7.5 million clean kilometers, save over 570,000 liters of import-dependent fossil fuel, and reduce carbon dioxide emission by over 1,230 tons. Fast forward to 2021, we see the world's largest electric two-wheeler factory in Tamil Nadu set up by Ola Electric. This is the future factory that has the capacity to employ over 10,000 individuals. On our 75th Independence Day, we had the company also release a world-class electric two-wheeler called S1, and the company is now all set to establish hypercharging networks across the country. Now, none of this would be possible without the government driving this type of a strategic change. India is truly charged to become a global hotspot for electric mobility. We have the central government announce innumerable measures to drive the accelerated adoption of electric mobility. These measures range from an allotment of rupees 10,000 crores to drive the adoption of EVs under the FAME scheme, further subsidies to drive the localized manufacturing at scale of both EVs and batteries in India, and so much more. As many as 22 states to have either a final or a draft EV policy. And these policies and regulations, what's interesting is that all of them are geared towards achieving circular economy principles. So you have governments that emphasize on integrating renewable energy to power electric vehicles on the one hand, to necessitating urban mining, wherein end of life vehicles and batteries are treated in order to secure the necessary raw materials you need to build future EV products and batteries. So this type of a cradle-to-cradle sustainable effort is being taken up by the central and state governments as well as industry stakeholders in their attempt to accelerate the adoption of EVs. A lot of this work is captured at the Ola Mobility Institute in our report called EV Ready India, which was done in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. We now move to the last paradigm of mobility, autonomous. Autonomous mobility, folks, is not only about driverless cars, it is also drones that can deliver essentials like medicines and groceries and food to the remotest parts of the world. In India, we see plenty of examples of AI improving safety, for instance. We have platforms like Ola that use AI engine that they've built called Guardian that can detect route detours, deviations, and prevent any unsafe incidents from occurring. We have many platforms around the world that leverage adapted driving to improve road safety. Similarly, AI is used to improve the reliability of public transport, reliability of hyperlocal deliveries, improve the efficiency and the positive environmental impact of the mobility ecosystem. At OMI, we are building on an exciting concept where we leverage AI to improve and reinvent mobility in India. This is a report that we're expecting to release in a couple of weeks' time. The last point for me to discuss would be to look at how India can leverage these new paradigms of mobility to drive economic growth. What is happening is not just the digitalization of our lives, but platformization of jobs is also simultaneously occurring. What it means is we have idle assets in the form of a room, a spare room in your house, or a two-wheeler that you're not using 24 hours a day that you can monetize whenever and wherever you want. This is platformization of labor. Consider the case of two-wheelers. In our report, The Power of Two Wheels, Bike Taxi, India's New Shared Mobility Frontier, we talk about how the 80% of India's automobile population, which are two-wheelers, have the potential to be shared and the potential to then therefore create 2+ million livelihood opportunities, along with generating a revenue of USD $4 to $5 billion. Building on this, Ola Mobility Institute undertook India's largest platform economy survey. We interviewed 5,000 workers belonging to the platform economy in 12 cities, 3,300 of them belonging to platforms, 1,700 of them outside the platform workforce. Here are a few images from our interviews in Delhi, Bengaluru, Mumbai, and Calcutta. All of our analysis of looking at what is the potential of platforms to unlock livelihood opportunities and how can India leverage this opportunity to propel its post-COVID recovery is captured in this report called Unlocking Jobs in the Platform Economy. So for us at OMI, sharing economy has immense potential, has so much to offer, and India's got the right kinds of ingredients on the policy front to truly unlock the full and true potential of the sharing economy. With that, I conclude my presentation. Please do follow Ola Mobility Institute on social media to keep updated on mobility developments. Thank you.
Thanks, Aishwarya. That was absolutely really, really interesting, to me, and I'm sure to several other people. And I'm glad that we kind of also spoke of the policy landscape that's kind of gathering and pushing this. And I think that was really interesting. Now I'm going to request Ketan Krishna as our next speaker. Ketan, are you ready? Ketan is from Rentomojo. Great. So let's get you on next.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm going to share a few perspective and thoughts, mostly conversational. If there are questions, just you can shoot out in between. I've been somebody who always had the fetish for four-wheelers, and I always had two cars with me. Somehow I managed it. And for somebody like me who started my career from Mumbai, then went to Delhi, then came back to Mumbai to Bangalore, I've just been shifting places, and the size of the houses and the entire demographics would just change after a few years. I was 2016, 17. I was in Mumbai. I was working with the bank, and I had, I had to travel significant distance to my workplace, and I had a car and a driver and all that entire setup. It was convenient, of course, but it used to cost me a lot, both from a mental engagement perspective and also from a financial perspective. And one fine day, my driver comes up and say, I am going to go on a leave for a month. Now, I was literally completely worried that how am I going to, I had no interest in traveling and driving for about 2.5 hours every single day in Mumbai, because I used to use that time either to take a nap or probably read something or just have some extended conversation that I've been missing. I decided not to drive myself, and I gave a shot to one of the rideshare apps. And for 30 days, I realized that this is something which is far more sensible, meaningful, and flexible. And of course, it was far better to me on the pocket. Now, I didn't have to manage an individual. I just had to pay as I was using. It was still in my control. And I didn't have to worry about the repair, maintenance, is somebody going to scratch my vehicle, so on and so forth. It actually brought a shift that I had never imagined. And it was a first experience. But that's where I realized how powerful the shared economy concept is. A good decision for me after that, then I shifted to Bangalore. That's when I joined Rentomojo. One decision that I took was that I'm not going to have more than one car. In future, I don't know if I'll even own one. Right? In Bangalore, I've mostly been using the ride shares and the app because that just makes far more sense. So that's where the first transition and transformation for me started, and my exposure to the entire shared economy grew. That's when Rentomojo was also having a conversation with me. And when we looked at the problem that we were trying to solve, it just made sense to me. Now, as somebody who has shifted 5 cities and 7 houses, this was a huge pain. It was a massive pain. Now, Delhi, I had a 3.5 BHK. I came back to Mumbai, I had a 2 BHK in which there were 5 people staying. Then I went to Gurgaon when I had a 3.5 BHK. Then I came back to Mumbai again to 2 BHK, and then Bangalore to 3 BHK. The cost and the effort of transportation was huge. Second, I had to find houses. This is what I had, and it should have been the other way around. So this was the second moment I realized how powerful this entire concept of shared economy is going to be, and glad that I've been part of Rentomojo. I'll give a quick perspective about Rentomojo, and especially about the entire concept of shared and subscription, and what are the trends that we are seeing, especially the impact that COVID has left to the market, not necessarily Rentomojo. Now, in simple terms, what is a subscription? Now, subscription is where it's a new model where, with the consent of the customer, the product or services are just being offered to in exchange of a recurring payment. That's simply put across from a business point. And what it does is, as an organization, it gives me a very clear line of revenue. It gives me a good predictability of what is going to happen. When I switch gears, and you guys, if you have used any subscription, now what subscription drives is a theme. It's a group, it's a cult, it's a thought saying that, okay, I believe in the shared economy. Now, that's a shift that subscription is seen. Subscription is no more a financial decision. You're linked to a purpose. You are hooked to a purpose. You are aligned to something bigger that you believe in, is where the simple payment actually transitions into something like a subscription. We believe at Rentomojo, this is the future. What it also does is it reduces the cognitive load on customers. The customers that we deal with, they're not bothered about what brand of washing machine is, or what brand of TV it is, or what brand of fridge or the furniture they're getting, right? They want something which is reliable, flexible, they can trust on it, it's affordable, and that's it. If I go back to 2014, this is exactly what my CEO Gitansh was facing. So he was again shifting locations. He was moving from one company to other company. And every time he had to buy furniture, sell it, and then buy a new in the new place. He saw a huge opportunity in terms of organizing this market. And rental existed. Rental has existed for quite some time, but it was completely unorganized. He saw an opportunity. We started with a pure play business opportunity. But what happened with time is, if you guys are aware of this double bottom line concept, that's a theme that started to emerge for us. While there is a financial impact that we were able to create, the more we got into the business, the more we started to look at how the shared economy or the circular economy is impacting the society at large. And I'm keeping the jobs aside. Pure play from a sustainability perspective, that started to change our perspective even stronger. While revenues and numbers are an outcome, sustainability and circular economy is something that we believe is going to become the core for us as an organization. And I'll give you some numbers. We as an organization by 2025 are expected to serve close to 1 million customers. And when I say serve, it is a physical transaction of a TV or a fridge or a furniture or a chair or a table, whatever he or she is looking at, in major tier 1, 2 cities. This is the kind of landscape that we see. If I just do a basic calculation, with this subscription model or the shared economy model, we are going to reduce the production of close to 1.3 million furniture and appliances by 2025. 1.3 million. And when we started to look at the game that we were trying to change, this was absolutely stunning and exciting. If I translate this into the metric tons of CO2 equivalent, this is close to about 336,000 metric tons of CO2 that will be reduced less. And to give you a comparative, what I'm talking about is, and because the production cost or the CO2 emission for a furniture or for a bed or for appliances is huge. It's humongous. Forget the operating cost. This is just the production cost. I'm talking about the fuel, the gasoline or the greenhouse gas that is emitted by about 1 lakh passenger vehicles in a year is typically what we would be able to save with such an impact. This is equal to close to 10 crore liter of diesel that would be consumed. This is massive, right? What we are essentially doing is we are also impacting the overall ecosystem by reducing the greenhouse gas emission, which actually close to about 100 wind turbines can reduce. These are the kind of impacts that we started to see. Absolutely. And we're talking about this kind of a emission, which actually is produced by about 50,000-60,000 houses in a year throughout in a tier 1 city. This is what we started to see as the double bottom line impact for us. We believe and we see a huge opportunity here. If you look at our customer base, these are millennials and Gen Zs, right? They look at the product quality, they look at the impact that they're doing to the society. This is what essentially we believe that the shared and the circular economy can do, one to the economy and of course to the entire globe at large. And we're just talking about 3 years from now. We have aspirations to go bigger, become better. That is of course going to change a lot of game for us. A little bit about what happened to us during COVID. And when COVID happened, there is a data that says that 52% of people from urban cities actually moved back to their hometowns. Now, this was the testing time for us. While it was not easy for us as a business, but one of the problems that we've been trying to solve for is this problem of flexibility, the pay per use or pay as you use, or just move and reduce the hassle of repair, maintenance, upkeep, transfer. We actually solve for all of those. Now imagine these 52% of the population going back to their hometowns, and there were 2 sets of people. One who had bought the entire home furniture and appliances on credit. And second, a lot of people who had used any of the shared economy platform, like all our competitors or including Rentomojo, right? Now, when they had to go home, what did they do? They closed the rental subscription or the rental for their home. They closed their internet and they gave back the products they had taken from any of the rental players. It was easy. It was easy for them. It was not easy for us, and I'll tell you why. And there is a second set of people who had actually taken this on credit. Now, look at the impact that they had. They had to either look at a warehouse space, or they actually couldn't go back home, or they were stuck, or they had to actually pay a significant amount to just transport these goods. And at the last, they just had to scrap it and sell it. So we actually realized how important and how actually the entire shared economy solved a problem for a lot of people, shared and the subscription combined. What we have started to see is a significant shift. Now, most of the customers that we are now getting are old to credit. And if you understand, old to credit are people who have actually taken a loan or have been exposed to a loan ever in past. So earlier, if about 50-60% of our people or the customers were old to credit, this has shot up to about 70-75%, which means people who were taking products and buying products on EMI have started to see a value in the entire rental and the subscription model because of the flexibility, because of the uncertainties that are there, because of the overall proposition on end of the day. It's only a utility, right? That's what COVID has taught us. What is utility? What is important? That's a differentiation. It's there in everybody's head. That's a huge shift that we saw. And we are glad that we've been able to stand during these difficult times. We are glad that our customers have been able to move back to their hometowns when they wanted. And now when they're coming back, we are, of course, a preferred choice for them. And that's been a huge shift that we essentially see in the entire ecosystem. And this is a huge market. We're talking about this Netflix generation, right? Which is very frequent in job change, in location change. They believe in shared living. They're very, very value conscious. They're looking at, we call it the Netflix generation, which is willing to stay light, which is going to pay as they use, where they're looking at a very, very easy way to switch and close, right? They also want to split payments, right? The three people, so about 60% of people in tier 1 cities, the millennials, they're actually on shared accommodation, right? So they take something for the home, everybody can share the pricing, or if they're moving out, somebody can pick it up. And the most important, ease of relocation. Average, they shift house every 11th month, right? For some interesting reasons, the home agreements in most of the places are only for 11 months. Now, after every 11 months, when they have to shift, it's a pain for them. Now, what do? They call us, close the subscription, or they say, transfer it. We take care of everything for them. They just enter the new house and they have the new products, which essentially get to them. So that's the power we see in the entire economy and the ecosystem. And thanks to the generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, which are very, very conscious about the circular economy, the greenhouse, the making the world a better place to live, we are glad that we are standing here as an organization who wants to solve the problem for them. That's from my side.
Thank you so much. That was very, very insightful, and we were really enjoying listening to you. We will come up with a lot more questions once Mr. Dhawan speaks. And so over to you.
Perfect. Hi, good evening, everyone. Really thankful to Chintan and FAS for organizing this webinar. I have a brief presentation. Maybe I could just take the liberty of just showing some slides. Wait, let me just figure out. Okay. You're able to see my screen, right? Shruti, is it okay? Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Good. So looking forward to the session. I think it's a very interesting topic for me. There are a lot of words that are floating out there, from circular economy to sharing economy, and having been worked, in this space for over 12-15 years now, the color just changes from green economy to blue economy to circular economy to sustainable economy to platform economy to, and you just, like you can see the trend, how it's changing. So a couple of words about me. Let me just see. Yeah, I'm Piyush Dhawan. I'm essentially working, like I've been working for the past 12 years with bilaterals and multilaterals. So come essentially from a policy background. And a couple of years ago, I won a Humboldt Fellowship to go back to Germany uh, to really understand what this concept or this buzzword of circular economy is. And the topic that I was really interested in understanding was circular cities. So, what is the future of cities? And at that time, this topic of circular cities was really coming up. So, that was my topic of research. And I'm part of some platforms, including Ellen MacArthur Foundation platform, and have recently, after coming back to India, started something known as the Circular Collective, which is the idea is to like really understand what does circular economy mean from an Indian perspective. Is it like is it just another idea from the Western economy and we take it and like and then we try decades to understand it, or does it really have some worth for our economy as well? So with that in mind, we started the Circular Collective. So going back to my research, I come more from an academic perspective as well, especially for circular economy. Like, and since Ketan and Aishwarya spoke before me, I think they would all, and since I think most of us who are at this webinar come from big cities, and you could imagine more than 55% of our global population currently lives in cities. So and this is where all the like the consumption of resources, consumption of water, energy takes place, and that results in, of course, like externalities in terms of air, water emissions, noise emissions, uh, and at the same time, I'm sure whenever you are looking at your locality, you would find a lot of underutilized assets, products, spaces. So, like what Aishwarya was mentioning, you find a lot of two-wheelers, but which could be used as sharing spaces, or what Ketan mentioned, like having the pain of moving houses. They're underutilized assets that could be shared by different people or communities. So I think it's very interesting to really understand that all the topics that we are today discussing, it's very much centered towards a city framework. Um, Essentially, in terms of circular economy, this is something that a lot of people start the conversation. What we currently live is in a linear economy, where essentially you take products from the planet, we make a product, and then we throw away the waste, and that becomes a waste. Like the consumer does not know where the product is really coming from and does not really care for the moment where the product is really going as well. So essentially, we are using that product just as a service. And what we, at least the circular economy concept propagates, is more thinking in terms of systems, like what is it that we can do to restore and regenerate. So to my understanding, there is not even a single product currently in the world which you throw and it sort of regenerates the economy. So any product that is being manufactured currently would go to a landfill or to a like a incineration plants at some point or the other. So any sharing on economy, any product that you say is sustainable would land up in a landfill, maybe 1 year, 10 years, 100 years down the line, but it would go to a landfill unless and until it's a biological product. And that is why I think it's important to really understand both these concepts. And it's not too easy actually if you go into literature to really understand what is the difference between, like, you have these concepts, sharing economy and circular economy, but not many people have really tried to understand what is the interdependence, what is the subset, what is the like a larger picture. So I've just tried to figure out what essentially it means, and maybe it helps you. So in circular economy, it is essentially upstream and downstream focus. So essentially, like you look at the product and you look at where it is being produced and where it is going. Whereas in a sharing economy, it is essentially focused towards downstream, like chain. Uh, in a sharing economy, we see a lot of examples which are, like incidental and are atomized. So like small initiatives across many cities that you would say, but whereas a circular economy seems more like a systemic perspective to look into. You find a lot of startups in the sharing economy, whereas a circular economy, it is more aligned towards corporates and large corporates, like working, having, like multiple value chains. Uh, a circular economy is essentially more top down. So you would, like look up to the government to come up with the regulatory endorsement and say, like, okay, now we have the resource efficiency policy, and, like, and this contributes to circular economy. Whereas a sharing economy, there are a lot of restrictions, like at least in the current economy as well, in the current policy as well, that inhibits the idea of sharing economy. At the same time, circular economy focuses more towards the environmental and the economic, because of course it's circular economy. And the sharing platform, it's more, like the societal focus. It's the right thing to do within a platform. You'll find a lot of disciplines, like at least on the left side, if you see, you'll find most of these examples of both circular and sharing in urban development. The idea is more around product service systems. You have a lot of business model designs and collaborative consumptions. Whereas if you look into, like what makes it different, then a sharing platform is essentially more into platforms, online markets, blockchains, supply and demand matching, so matchmaking sort of examples. Whereas a circular economy, you'll find more like material flow analysis, life cycle analysis of a product. So this has been actually published as a journal article, only came up last month. So I think very befitting to this conversation as well, to really understand what is the nuances between them. And to make it easier, so there is a framework within the circular economy nomenclature, which is known as the resolve framework. And it starts with, like regenerating, sharing, optimizing, looping, virtualizing, or exchanging. So, like any example that you take up currently, which is, like promoting sharing economy or circular economy, would take facets of these, like components. So in this, like a discussion, of course, we talk about sharing economy, where I think Ketan would agree that there are nuances of exchange economy, virtualizing as well in his, like in the platform that he mentioned, and even for any other platform. So in its entirety, sharing economy plus, like these components would result into a more circular product, if I had to sort of in very layman language. I wanted to again, like just take you through three principles of circular economy. Like what is the difference between both these concepts that's being coming up in the past 3, 4, 5 years, at least in India, it's quite recent. So the first concept is around designing out waste and pollution. So essentially, can we have a product that does not go, like emit pollution or is going into waste? The second concept is around keeping products and material in use as long as possible. And that's where the sharing platform comes in, like if it's sharing. So for example, an average drilling machine that you have in your house, every house has it nowadays, it runs for 13 minutes in its entire value chain, in entire life cycle. But yet we still have that, like a Bosch or a Hilti drilling machine. Why not just share it with your local neighbor if you're planning to just drill a couple of holes in the wall itself? So the idea is to keep that material in use as long as possible. And the third principle of circular economy is, can that product regenerate natural systems? So for the discussions today, I think I came across three examples that I've worked with quite closely as part of my research as well, and maybe you would have heard of them. If not, then it's even more interesting for you to look into. So we'll talk about Retuna, Homey, and Ripley to just take you through all three of them. So Retuna essentially, like it was a concept that came up in close to Stockholm in Sweden in 2016-17, and the idea essentially is, like in a developed economy like Sweden, the product from a house is taken up. Like after the product life cycle finishes, you throw away the product, but then it is taken up by the municipality. So in fact, this mall was started by the municipality, and because of the huge trash that they had amassed over the years, they decided to call it like a second-hand shopping mall. Now, if you think about it, in India, which is just going crazy about every city, the idea of development is around which shopping mall is the biggest, which has movie complexes and the biggest food court. We still are yet to see any shopping mall which just walks the talk in terms of second-hand resources. So you'll go and find hundreds of stores selling you clothes, but there is still not even a single like a store that is taking back these products. So the idea could be, in fact, for in India, why not even have just one floor out of these 7 floors, which caters to, like a second hand, or it's more like a resharing or sharing platform. In this supermarket, not supermarket, it's the galleria, it's the mall, actually, the shopping mall. You get products from electronics, furnishing, children articles, and the idea is to barter, to exchange, and becomes a very bustling space now in Sweden. So I'm just putting some food for thought, like some things that could come, you could find coming up in next some years in India as well. The second concept is actually from US, and it is known as Ripley. Very interestingly, I think if a product, so essentially the product Ripley comes from a university. Essentially, there was a person who was studying postdoc in neurosciences, and like he was just so sad to see so many products in laboratories like chemistry lab, physics laboratory, biological laboratory, just going and dumping, and then like the departments were just buying a lot of products. So what he did is like he just started virtualizing, or he started just digitizing all the products that were there in the faculty. So the university had various departments and faculties all across the city, and he sort of virtualized all the products that the departments would not need, and he created like a marketplace. So essentially you see again, you like a matchmaking platform that you see even in India, but in this case they did it for a university level. So ideally, if you have any product that is lying in your house, in your office, or in your warehouse as well, that could be virtualized and then could be digitized and could be shared with a larger platform. The third example, and I think maybe Ketan, I think would be interesting if you haven't come across this, is known as Homey, and this is essentially again for white goods in a city, and it's a concept that started in some cities now in Netherlands. The idea, I don't know about Rentomojo, but the idea of Homey is that, of course, you buy the product on a subscription, but you even buy the use on a subscription model. So for example, if I am interested in like getting my clothes clean, then I would rent a washing machine, and at the same time I could do a subscription model saying I want to use this washing machine only 15 times a month. And then like a recharge system, you can put that money, and essentially through automation it would tell you now is the best time to use this machine, especially in Western countries. Like the power nowadays, you can see it's more expensive during the day and it's cheaper during the evening, so you can automate it and say I want to sort of wash my clothes in the night and automate it. And then like the idea is to even do a subscription model of the usage, and they're doing it for washing machines, they're doing it for dishwashers, and it's a very interesting model where like it's going beyond just offering a product, but then offering that as a service. And this is an interesting example where they are changing the consumption behavior as well by like telling them, okay, it's better to wash clothes at 30 degrees and not at 60 degrees, because that would result into like so much emission. So very interesting interface that I think could be interesting for you to also look into. So in terms of like what is the future of sharing economy and contribution to circular economy, coming from an academic perspective, I would say like of course they are significant drivers on sustainable development, but they need to be really understood more. Like it is heartening to see like the circular economy is now being used, at least in India, as good as waste management, recycling, or sustainability as well. Like there is a fundamental difference between those concepts. At the same time, like of course one needs to go beyond the economic dimensions of sustainable development, which is in both these terminologies. And the circular economy literature is more on environmental issues, and sharing economy literature is more on societal implications. So we need to think more, like can a sharing platform become more circular? And for the moment, the sharing economy is not really used, or not is viewed as a systemic change. It is more used as like at smaller interventions across the cities, and which has a tremendous potential, by the way, like to even change policy frameworks in this regard. At the last point, like, of course, from policy perspective, we need to understand which policy drivers should foster sharing economy in India. And this is something which I think if sharing platforms in India, like come together and say what are the hindrances to really foster in a country, then that should be now taken up to a policy level as well. And at the same time, like as I mentioned, cities have been identified as potential targets for like sharing and circular economy, and you'll find a bunch of circular cities ideas coming up across the globe. And the idea would be, I think it aligns really well with both these concepts at the city level. Yeah, those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Piyush. That was really fabulous. And I'm going to, I'm overwhelmed with questions myself, but I obviously don't want to take questions from, don't want to eat into generic time. But as we discussed at the beginning, I'm going to let each of the panelists ask questions before we ask questions, because we found in previous times that's always resulted in extremely exciting interactions. So I'll start with Aishwarya. Aishwarya, do you have a question for any of your co-panelists?
In fact, yes. So I have a quick question for Ketan, and perhaps a more theoretical question for Piyush based on the presentation we made. To Ketan, you brought an interesting point about people who increasingly become old to credit thanks to them using the rental furniture platforms so much more. I want to ask you if you've studied who might be your typical candidates for becoming new to credit, in the sense that we are seeing in the shared mobility space that a lot of the youngsters and migrants who are coming to Tier 1 markets are becoming new owners of two-wheelers and four-wheelers, and are becoming new individuals accessing credit for the first time. So like that, in the Rentomojo world, are there any thoughts you can share about who is this ideal individual, who's your typical individual who's new to credit?
Sure, thank you for that, Aishwarya. We did, this was interesting for us, so we did try to understand who our customer, especially the new to credit is. So there are two kinds of themes that we saw, and what I'll do is I'll also wear the hat because I've worked with the banking institution. I do understand, when I was with the bank, I would talk about credit. Now when I'm at Rentomojo, of course, shared economy is a progress to that. Now, if you look at one of the conversations in the banking industry was and is that the newer, the Gen Zs, right? The first-time job seekers, most of them are coming from well-to-do economic background, all right? Now, these people do not have an innate need to take something on credit. They're not used to it, right? Because their parents probably would have bought 2 homes, 3 homes, and have structured a lot of things. But these are also people who are very independent. All right. And again, their focus is on experience and something that they can pay with. Now, if you look at the credit thing, end of the day, they still ask for, if you go for the first time loan, they'll try to understand what's your loan history, right? They don't want to get into the hassle of that. So that's one set of people, the first time job seekers who come from a good economic background and who are looking at operating independently. Rentomojo or a similar platform is a first choice from them. That's one clear theme that we saw. The second is, again, first-time job seekers, but who are coming from a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 or a Tier 4 to a metro city. Again, they don't have the financial background or a significant economic support. Now, rental or subscription makes sense to them. You just have to pay 5-10% as a deposit. And we have a post-paid kind of a model, right? You don't pay it in advance. Once you use it, you pay. And trust me, a person can comfortably furnish a 1 BHK, 1.5 BHK for anything between 1,200 rupees to 2,000 rupees a month, right? That's phenomenal. Now, they don't have to go to the bank or the CIBIL or the PAN card and go through the entire pain. They just can pick up the product, experience it, and carry on with their life. So these are the two people that we see who come into the workforce. Again, first-time job seekers, mostly, but coming from two different stratas, but still independence, flexibility, and something which is value. That's what essentially they're looking for.
Great. So, Aishwarya, you had a question for Piyush, right?
Yeah, very quickly, I wanted to understand if Piyush also saw circular economy and sharing economy as concepts that are divergent, because you did indicate that there are opportunities where sharing economy can be studied to see if there is a whole of systems approach that it can take. So what we've done at OMI is to see that shared electric mobility, for instance, has a very decarbonizing effect in that you can use renewable energy to power EVs. That way the upstream is sort of clean. You can ensure that obviously the emissions are zero. So when you use the product, there is limited wastage or pollution. Then you go to the extent of reusing this, batteries can be repurposed to storage, for storage needs and whatnot. So I just wanted to understand from Piyush if he personally also thought that these need to be divergent concepts, or can there be some convergence, and just on that.
Mm-hmm. It's fairly interesting, because it's coming more from a sharing platform, which is more like your business model, whereas the circular economic model is more towards your internal operations of it, which caters more towards your core business. So ideally for Ola, if I could assume it right, it would be better if the product that in this case, in a vehicle in this case, is has a longer life cycle. So you would not really buy, a driver might not buy, or a Ola might not buy a product that is just going to go bad in next 1 year, right? Or goes into a garage or gets a lot of repairs done every year or every couple of every 6 months. So you would like to have a product which is longer lasting, that does not break too often, and and because the number of hours that it spends in a garage means less amount of business and less amount of products available for the customer. So I see that sharing economy, while the concept at least for Ola would be more in terms of your operation, but in terms of your internal operation, the concept should be more around it should be more circular, which is more around it would change your procurement processes, the idea of getting a product which is longer lasting, or if there is an EV scrappage policy that comes into implementation, then Ola would not like to be at the forefront saying what happens to the product after its use. So there needs to be more alignment to saying, okay, the product is there for 10 years, you would want that product to be there running for 12 years, and that's how you would see a systemic change from an Ola perspective in terms of circular economy.
Thanks, Piyush. That was helpful.
Great. Ketan, do you have any questions for either of your co-panelists?
I have a question for Aishwarya, and this one, thank you note for Piyush. Piyush, I actually today understood that these are two different concepts. It will be interesting for me to read more. So thank you so much for that. I think what you're doing is very important. I was, as a layman, just had these two as interchangeable words rather than understanding their concept different. So definitely we'll be in touch with you, and it'll be good to understand that. So thank you so much for that. A question for Aishwarya. This is more again out of curiosity. Now, I come from a place where when I was growing up, I've seen life without electricity for a large part of my life. Right, it's a very small town, and I know in India electricity is still a problem. Now, when the world is talking about, and in India is talking about the EV or the electricity, and when for the basic life, the electricity supply is such a challenge, and I've traveled to very, very small places in town, how difficult, I think the availability of the power, and second, I think power is still being generated by using still the non-renewable resources in India. Now, in that value chain, are you possibly seeing a huge challenge or a blip which needs to be solved for? This piece is not adding up in my head right now. So I have an electricity deficiency across the nation. I still produce, my understanding is 80% of our electricity is still through non-renewable sources, which in other form comes into vehicles. So how essentially these two would come together in the aspirations that you guys are driving, especially with the electric mobility?
Sure. So I think in all of urban India, we've solved for the problem of electricity availability, right? I think we have both state government as well as private sector actors that are doing wonderfully well in order to ensure that a good amount of power reaches all of us for all the variety of needs that we have. In terms of whether this power is clean, India has also taken massive strides towards greening the grid. In that, we will see that because of our nationally determined goals commitment, we have already reached, we've in fact overachieved our renewable energy based power production in the country. Now, this is wonderful news for everybody who's believing in the future of mobility, which will be powered by electric vehicles. We are also seeing a lot of the industry actors actively integrate renewable energy at source. So you'll see, for instance, many of the charging stations being fully equipped with solar panels. This ensures that as an end consumer who you're conscious, you want to ensure that your EVs are not just zero emission, but they guzzle clean power. That is being taken care of with the private sector and of course businesses that are offering charging solutions, but ensuring that there are solar rooftops that are providing clean energy to power your EVs. So I think both government as well as the private sector is doing a bunch of things to ensure that we are greening the grid, and we are also integrating renewable energy at source when we start charging our EVs. So these are two ways I'd argue we are heading towards a more sustainable and to a small extent circular future as well.
Thank you. That helps. Thank you.
Excellent. So I think finally, and we have so many questions, so let's ask Piyush. Piyush, if you have any short questions for either of your co-panelists.
Sure, very briefly to Ketan. Ketan, what is stopping you from, or I don't know if you have, of course, scale-up plans, but from a policy perspective, what is really that is stopping you as a as a startup organization to scale up to different, maybe even to smaller cities and stuff?
So one, we have in the last 7 months gone into smaller cities. But if you ask me if there are two major changes that we've been reaching out to certain officials in the government. One is very simple. If there could be an acceptance of using rental of furniture and appliances as in, say, a tax-saving HRA component. Very simple, right? It will incentivize people to move towards that, right? Because we have seen, right, the comp structure or the tax structure has been a significant driver of consumption, but rental falls in between.
Yeah.
Right? It is a capex, opex confusion, lease, dry, wet. It just falls in between. So that's one thing that we've been trying to do, but we haven't heard back. But we believe that will actually help us go far deeper in the tier 1 and tier 2 cities. And second, right now, there's not we are actually somebody who's between an e-commerce and an NBFC. Now, policies are being formed for either banking and financial sectors or for consumer durable companies or companies in that. We're actually a connector. So, and this ecosystem is right now too small for driving attention. Now, we don't get anything, either credit points or carbon credit or any incentive to expand further. We have to go through the similar process of now. Simple. If we can be given access to good credit at a very reasonable cost, right? Now we typically have to go to an NBFC, raise it at a considerable amount, and then buy assets, keep it, store it, maintain it, deploy it, repair, maintain it. So there's nowhere in my value chain I have an incentive. So what I'm saying is incentivize my process of credit. Like for a lot of manufacturing companies, government have come up with a policy where they're kind of giving them at a very, very reasonable credit line. That's one. Second, end consumer, can we incentivize them with something like an HRA inclusion or considering this, because it's a sizable bucket and a lot of people can save significantly on the tax income, right? that we believe will suddenly push it up very, very significantly.
Can I just quickly ask, does the government have any provision within their public procurement?
Piyush, I'm going to have to request you not to ask another question.
Okay.
Because we're just quite overwhelmed with a lot of audience
questions.
questions in the meantime.
Got it.
Yeah, so I do want to give people a chance. That's just because
Sure,
we
we'll
don't
take it
have too
separately,
much
yeah.
time. We have like 22 minutes or so. So I think, the first question that I do want to ask, and I want to ask of Aishwarya, there was this question which was really about, about gender diversity amongst gig workers in the mobility sector, specifically in the sharing economy space. So do you have some insights on gender and the gender diversity and how much women are able to participate in this?
Thanks, Bharati, and also thanks, folks for asking this question. Mobility is still pretty much a male-dominated occupation, right? So when platform businesses started in this space, they couldn't find enough number of women to onboard. But as platforms have matured, we realized that platforms offer the dual benefit of one, flexibility and choice of labor. So be it a man or a woman, they can monetize their idle assets when and where they want. This is an option that is not available in traditional forms of employment. The second advantage is platforms are able to augment asset ownership. So in our study, we've seen those that start with no asset whatsoever are able to gain access to assets in the form of new skills, new physical assets such as two-wheelers or three-wheelers or four-wheelers, and of course they're also able to access finance. So these two benefits, which are missing in traditional forms of employment in India and elsewhere, are driving are sort of an inflection point in bringing more women to the platform economy. So today, the representation of women as platform workers in the mobility space is minuscule. It doesn't even add up to a few, absolute numbers, but we are seeing platforms both consciously and indirectly catalyzing the adoption or the joining of women into the space. So many platforms today, for instance, have also announced a quota system to ensure that a significant proportion of their workforce is women. Many others in the logistics space, for instance, are also looking to bring and mainstream persons with disabilities into the workforce. So these are clearly avenues that are getting opened up because of the way in which platforms are designed. Again, this is something that's missing in traditional employment, and we can now only see that both women and persons with disabilities will be found in increased numbers in the years to come. On a side note, we at Ola Mobility Institute are coming up with a detailed study on women in the platform economy. So a lot of statistics, etc., will be released sometime in September.
Thanks a ton. And Tamanna, I hope this also answers your question on, how can scaling up in India be made more inclusive of all sections of society. So now I'll just move to the next question, which is for Piyush. And Piyush, can you give us examples of any organization or business? And I'll request everyone to keep it relatively short because there's so many questions. Can you give us examples of organizations or any business in India that you think is setting the standard for integrating circular and sharing economy? But before you go to that, many of us actually believe that the sharing economy at some ways is a subset of the circular economy. And that's often the way the environmental sector looks at it. But let me hand you the very specific question, if you can very specifically respond to it, Piyush. Mm-hmm. It has you by name.
Okay, thank you for that question. See, I think it's impossible to just pick up an example which is completely circular, because clearly it is difficult to say what is really circular as well. Like it's like, is it within the operations or outside the operations? Idea should be that every business, in order to remain in business in the next years, should aim towards circularity because of depleting resources and their dependencies on water and energy. So ideally, every company should go towards circularity. Difficult to really say what circularity, how much circular a city, a business, or a country is, because of the dependency on the resources. So I don't really think there is anything that is really circular in this regard, because yeah, it's not possible currently.
Okay, so let's move to the next question. Piyush, you'd written an answer out giving the Ellen MacArthur Foundation information, but I still wanted to take this to the other panelists if they did have a response. Prajakta Nene had this question, which I really liked, which is like, how can we create a circular economy in the FMCG sector, because a lot of the plastic pollution comes from that sector, and our local zero face shops or reliable service is the only option. So before I ask other people, or very readily throw some ideas, I'm wondering if Aishwarya or Ketan, for example, would care to briefly speak if you have any ideas. It's not mandatory, of course, no pressure.
Thanks,
Either of you?
Bharati. No, in fact, I think Ms. Nene's also answered the question with a few ideas where she suggested if refillable services or zero waste shops could be designed. Beyond that, I just have to submit that Jugaad is a way of life in India where we reuse these plastic containers at home for a bunch of things. I think at a consumer level, we can try our best to not buy too many of these and look at refill packages, but they too are plastic. So I'm afraid I don't have any creative solution for what the industry.
Ketan, anything very briefly, if at all?
No, I think coming back to the point that Aishwarya said, it has to start from us. We can expect organizations to change. They would, but what can we do individually to, as Aishwarya said, look at hacky solutions, give the message, make sure that you lead by example, and that's where the change is going to happen. It's a conditioning of hundreds and thousands of years, so hundreds of years at least. So it's going to take time, but it has to start from each one of us to figure out how conscious we are and how aware we are, and how do we start to make small impacts as we go.
So I just want to very briefly come in here, and I'm not, Prajakta, please contact Chintan, if you'd like, at info@chintan-india.org. But very briefly, because, I don't want to take everybody else's time, but a couple of things there. The plastic waste management rules actually require brand owners to take away multi-layered plastics, to collect them to a certain percentage based on their sales, and either recycle these or dispose of them in ways that are in alignment with the laws of the land. So that's one. And while there are refill stores and so on, I think what's also interesting is looking at how retail and particularly how to upgrade that traditional retail where you bought from bags and bags of open rice and so on, and took what you wanted and so on. And how do you ensure quality in that model? And thirdly, of course, we need much more R&D, but I have so many ideas if it's plastic, but I don't want to kind of belabor the point, but I do request you to please join our webinar on plastics and the circular economy in September, because I think that would be a great opportunity for a lot of this to be answered. I want to quickly go back to Piyush. Piyush, I don't totally agree with you when you say that there's sharing economies are different from circular economies, because in fact, I think the narrative of the circular economy is quite inclusive of the repair economy, the sharing economy, and so on. But this is not the point for our conversation, or at least the moment. Several people have asked you to lay out what you think is the difference between the sharing and the circular economy, and what are the challenges to align these. And if you could do that in a couple of minutes, if you could answer that question, that would be totally great. But where are you, Piyush? I think he dropped out. His net just fell. Can someone, WhatsApp him, because he's very much in demand.
Yes, I'm reaching out to him. In the meantime, you could take another question.
Yeah, I'll do that. There's no problem. Ketan, there's a question for you, because your CV included HR, and I think your point is that HR should be part of the sharing economy. So the question is, what are your insights about the importance of HR in the sharing economy, especially with in terms of creating jobs? So if you can tell us in a couple of minutes what you think of that.
Sure, thank you. So the fact that I'm sitting here itself means that HR has and should have started to get a share on the table about business and share economy. At the end of the day, it's a problem that organization is solving. So I'm fortunate that my organization is okay with me sitting here and sharing a point of view. At the core, and sharing economy has two impacts. One, it is going to lead to a lot of secondary and tertiary employment that will happen, right? That may not be directly on the roles of a company. And second, it will have an impact on the kind of people that you are going to have in the organization. Now, a very important lesson that I learned was, if as an organization you don't believe and follow what you're solving for, there is always going to be a disconnect. Now, which means the role, and if you're talking about shared economy as a practice, what policies, what processes, what systems do I implement in my organization that enables the adoption of shared economy? So that's one thing that we do. Like, we do have policies and processes which enable people to go with a rental model. We enable our people to take products on rental, and there is a substantial upside that we give to them, incentivizing also, and also talk about it. We have been one of the fortunate companies where almost 70-80% of our employees have been a user of our product, which itself says that there are people who believe in the economy and the problem that we're solving for, and they're trying to up the game in terms of how do we take it to the consumer. So that's the first part. How do you align the business and the people strategy together? And shared economy, no shared economy, I think it is still there. The second extrapolation or the future that I see of shared economy is, and shared economy, when I say, one of the important forms of shared economy is the gig economy or the gig workforce. While it has started to evolve in platform workers or very transactional role where somebody has an asset or a time that they want to use, it has started to see a shift, and it has started to create a shift for the thinking workforce also. Now imagine a very small organization who can't afford a CFO. Can a CFO serve on with 4 companies or 5 companies? Because the idea is about value creation. And thanks to COVID, thanks to work from home, the barriers that we had about trust and watching, sitting over the shoulder, and people will only work when you're watching them, they actually have been all proven wrong, and they're out of the window. This is opening up a new challenge, new opportunity for the entire gig workforce, independent of the hierarchies. Now, gig will not stay only at a bottom or a platform. It is going to start shaping up and coming up in the largest spectrum of workforce. That's going to be super amazing, because it will change a lot of dynamics for organizations, for people. And again, we're creating a shared economy where we are creating more value per person vis-a-vis what he or she could have done. So that's from me here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, Piyush, we now have under 2 minutes left. So I'll just very briefly repeat your question, but you unfortunately have very little time because we do need to wind down. But it is about the differences between sharing and circular economy and why the two can't align. And I just want to state, like I said, that in the environmental sector, many of us see repair, sharing, all of that as subsets of the wider circular framework. But we're here and you're the guest, and so we really want to listen to you. So 2 minutes to you. Okay. And 2 is unfortunately and terribly unfortunately really 2, but we promise that we will create micro videos and share those. So 2 starting now.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, I think it's not all about what is subset, what is the outset, and what is the bigger picture, or like what is the a bigger term in this regard. We all come from the same vision and mission that we have, like is to be more sustainable, to make sure that we have enough on the planet for the next generation to come, make sure, like that the water, the energy that we have is there for the future generation. So it's, like circular economy is essentially a tool to help businesses like achieve their true potential, which is more longer lasting. So what we see essentially with startups, it's like to sustain them for a longer duration, they would have to think about circularity, because that is how like a product would be more longer lasting, to generate employment, to generate loyalty and reputation within the customer base. So be it through sharing economy or a gig economy, platform economy, they are just means of achieving the same concepts which have been laid down by SDGs as well. And I think if you are interested in understanding, of course, 2 minutes is too less. Feel free to join our platform on the Circular Collective, where we have these discussions every day. We've published around 80 articles now. We've also, as Aishwarya was mentioning, we have tried to decode what is the difference between frugal economy and circular economy as well, where I'm working with Professor Jaydeep Prabhu, who wrote the book Jugaad from University of Cambridge. And we have sort of also tried to decode all these concepts, and then it is up to the businesses to see what is best for them, rather than us academic preaching, like that this is what the way should be. But yeah, feel free to join in. It's just starting off a conversation right now.
So Piyush, thank you. I am sorry that we could only give you 2 minutes, but I guess this is an opportunity for people to at least start thinking, and your conversation and your words have at least, pressed a little button and open thoughts.
A nudge, yeah.
So grateful that to all of you that you joined. And I'm going to kind of close this by handing this back to my colleague, Shruti Sinha. Over to you, Shruti.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our audience for being here and asking very interesting questions and engaging with us. Thank you, Bharati, for moderating this, and Sri Ranjani for sort of organizing and arranging this. Thank you mostly to our speakers. It was an absolute delight, and also a lot of information and good and insightful comments and insightful thoughts, which will sort of engage us and help us think more. So thank you so much for that. I also wanted to say that we are doing a series of webinars, and we have 2 more coming up in September on very, very interesting themes, again around circular economy, sharing economies, but to do with furniture and plastic. So please remain engaged with us, and I look forward to meeting our speakers in person when we can, and engaging more as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us here. Have a great week.
Yeah, closing the meeting now then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
All the best. Stay safe.
Yeah.